Good afternoon, everyone. I think we have a good number of people for having a healthy discussion. So it's so with that, we also have a good number of panelists, and without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Before that, let me introduce myself. I'm Mahesh. I'm from National Institute of Urban Affairs, and I'm currently heading their Climate Center for Cities, which is also called CCube, and we have been working in the area of climate and also sustainability and looking at NDC more from an urban perspective. So we have a good number of panelists. So I don't know if the panelists are going to feel comfortable coming here or being comfortable sitting there, but we can have a good, healthy discussion post every presentation. And since there is a small group of people, we can also make sure that everybody gets a chance to discuss with them at the end. So our first speaker, Ms. Nilima Soni. She's Director of Landscape and Environmental Planning Department at Delhi Development Authority. And she's been working as a director in the Landscape and Environmental Planning Department of DDA. And she also has a bachelor's in architecture and a master's in landscape architecture and over 21 years of experience. Um, and so it'll be good to have other panelists also. Ma'am, please come on to the dais. I will invite our second speaker, Dr. Sasha Bruja. And Sasha Bruja is currently a transportation professional with more than 14 years of, business development and consulting experience, and he's also, a global expert in the field of urban and inter-urban transport and mobility, focusing on policy and pricing. So he holds a PhD from University of Hamburg, Germany, and he's currently the director for business development at Mobility and Urban Services, Aegis. We have our third speaker, Mr. Venkat Garimala. He's the VP for Strategy and Sustainability at Schneider Electric India. So he heads their strategy and alliance and within the Greater India Zone, and he's also leading their CSR and energy efficiency program for the company. Welcome on board. And we have Ms. Jamila Lolalan Kolo, and she's the project manager for Smart and Sustainable Cities for Ministry for Ecological Transition and Cohesion of the Territories Government of France. I think she'll be joining us virtually. Do we have her on the screen? Can somebody confirm whether she's there with us online? And Jamila Lowlalan is a project manager on sustainable and smart cities for the Directorate for European and International Action, part of the ministries of ecological and solidarity transition and territory cohesion. Ms. Jamila, can you hear us? She'll join us in a few seconds. That's great. So let's move on to our next speaker, Ms. Isabel Dinho, and she's Development and Partnership Director at Efficacity. So she has been developing energy efficiency services and startup companies for over 15 years, and specifically in the field of innovative technologies such as the demand resource model, commercial and residential peak saving and load shedding, and also certain digital platforms for housing renovation. Welcome on board. And finally, we have Mr. Sunil Kumar, Senior Industry Consultant from Dassault Systems, India. And so Mr. Sunil Kumar helps major transition and mobility customers like Maruti Suzuki, Honda, Hero MotoCorps, Volvo, Mahindra, and infra projects and customers such as smart cities and India Railways in their digitalization efforts. And he's graduated as a mechanical engineer and has worked in the field using CAD/CAM solutions. And I think Sunil Kumar joined Dassault System in 2010, so he's been working with them for over 12 years and looking mostly at their mobility and transition. So we have with us a good number of, and our final speaker, Beringer Mercier. Hi, she's the project director for resilience at CEREMA, which is a government body aimed towards resilience and sustainability. And she has over 14 years of professional experience in France, including the French Overseas Department, and also internationally in Serbia, Liberia, Uganda, China, Tunisia, India, Burma, Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka, Morocco, and Netherlands. The list goes on. And welcome. Thanks for joining us online. And she's specialized in the support of projects and interface between urban development and climate from the territorial scale and also towards operational planning. So we have with us a good set of speakers and a good set of audience now joining us today. So I'll start with our first speaker. Ma'am, you have 10 minutes time. Please go ahead with the presentation. So after your presentation is over, if we have time, we'll take a few questions. Otherwise, we'll have it at the end of the round.
So, hello everyone. First of all, I thank the organizers to give us an opportunity to come here and speak and share the kind of work that we are doing. I'm representing the Landscape Department of Delhi Development Authority. This is the only body in the entire country that has a team of in-house landscape architects to ensure that we are walking towards the right path. The time is short, and I would ask for an excuse in the beginning itself. The Honorable Lieutenant Governor is visiting one of my sites at 5, so I would probably will have to leave after I speak. So my apologies. Any questions, any clarifications further on will be entertained on the email for sure. Thank you so much. So not taking much of time, what I'll here try and explain it to you, that how is it that urban planning and design can actually maximize the effects of climate change. I'll explain it through one of our projects. This project is very close to my heart. It's the restoration and rejuvenation of the floodplains of River Yamuna that we are doing. So what did we do? We first identified the goal, then figured out the strategies at the city level and at the floodplain level, drew out 3 principles, which are major 3 guiding principles, and then the processes involved. So these were the basic 3 guiding principles: ecosystem restoration, minimizing adverse impacts of the anthropogenic activities that we have been doing, and connect our people to our river, because we've literally turned our backs towards our floodplains and this particular river that we're having. So how did we go about it? There were these certain targets that we figured out in each of the guiding principles. And then we drew out a list and a matrix of various strategies which would be befitting, non-befitting, or partially suitable to each category of the guiding principle. And from the city level, then we moved on to the floodplain level. So if I could just take an example and tell you that creating catchment wetlands or detention basins or retention basins was found fruitful to ensure flood control. This is simple basic logic, but when we are designing or planning for our cities, sometimes these things do not become the overriding factors, and that's where we fail. So these matrices were drawn, and after the matrix were drawn, so what you see on screen right now is a Google image of what we call Zone O. So Zone O is the zone of the river. Sometimes people do not understand that the floodplains are a part of the river space. So what you see in the middle, the thin blue line, is actually the river channel, the cunit. And the area above and below are the floodplains. That's the land of the river. So what we did was we walked from where the river enters the city at Palla and leaves it at Jaipur, about 56 kilometers both the bank, with those matrix in our hands, trying to identify on site what were the areas where we could actually conserve biodiversity, or the areas rich in natural biodiversity already with us, where there were already anthropogenic activities or an urban interface was already active with the public. And what were the areas where you could actually make detention basins based on the soil, the subsurface movement of water. So we drew out this comprehensive plan. And I can proudly share with you, there are about 10 projects where we've started working in terms of planning. And there are these 3 projects that you see on site. We fondly named various projects on the different names of the river. So River Yamuna was the sister of the Lord Yam, the Lord of Death. So these names that you see like Asita and Kalandi, these are the different names of River Yamuna itself. So we fondly named our projects on that. And what you see is on each project on the top left is where when we started the work and how it looks like. So what are we doing? We're actually planting the native riverine plantation that is supposed to augment the lost biodiversity or the ecosystems of the place. And wherever feasible, we are so there are court orders, NGT orders that are dictating what development should happen on this. The National Green Tribunal has given us in detail orders, which we are adhering to. So the areas next to the roads, about 150 to 200 meters, are for the public. So we are trying to make cycle tracks and everything in kacha material, something that is not permanent because no RCC, no construction is allowed. And wherever the water depressions allowed us, we are augmenting water. So proudly I can tell you about 6 lakh cusecs of water, 6 to 8 lakh. We are storing in about 10 depressions that we've already restored. So this was the story of the project river. And another feather in DDA's cap is 7 biodiversity parks. I do not know how many of you are from Delhi or have seen Delhi, but the 7 biodiversity parks have restored and are successfully in the process of restoring the lost ecosystems. So there is one on the upper edge of the river itself, it's called Yamuna. There's one on the Aravali. So that's actually redeveloping or restoring the lost heritage, natural heritage, of the Aravali ranges of that particular ecosystem. And there are many, like Tilpat Valley, there's one in the northern ridge, there's a Neela Horse, an old horse which was deteriorated due to the construction activities happening all around. So everything has been restored. So this is another project where we try and make a difference by just planning and designing. And that sort of gives a cushion to the city. I don't know how many people here realize DDA does almost 6 to 7 lakhs of plantation every year. And it's a multi-tier plantation, not only just planting trees. So we try and figure out what does the ecology of that place actually demands. And based on that, different tier plantations are designed and then are planted every year. This year also our target is about 2.5 lakh trees. And in total, if you see the grasses, the shrubs, the 3 stories, together is about 7 lakhs. So this is since the time was short, I've just brought indicators of richness at Yamuna Biodiversity Park. All of you here are please welcome to come and visit our biodiversity park. There's a website already existing. You can find details. Anybody personally wanting to know or figure out some things is most welcome to contact us. The second project, which I would just talk in detail about, is called Baghe Bahar. We've named it Baghe Bahar, the Garden of Spring. It is a district park at Vasant Udyan. People who know where Vasant Vihar and Vasant Udyan or Basant Lok is would know where this is. So this is one of the, so just a little piece of history. Firoz Shah Tughlaq planted about 1,500 gardens in the city. This is the only last existing garden which had certain remnants of what was done at that point in time in history. So when we were asked by the RWA to redevelop or to upgrade or to augment, we layered, several layers on it were put on, like the historical layer was there and the urban layer was there. The different kind of users were using these green areas. So we studied everything together and how we've been able to trace a sense of history back to what it was. We've tried and restored it. There were orchards, there were terraces, there were certain indicators that we got from the history which have been restored, and the place is available for everybody to come and visit. These are just some of the pictures which show you how the place looks like in when it is in bloom. And otherwise, large sprawling greens, eco-friendly materials have been used. We've ensured that not 100%, but 85 to 90%, it is accessible to everybody, whether on foot or people who have different needs. So this is one of the parks, and we are very proud of it. I'll just take you through some glimpses of other green areas which DDA is trying to do. This is something which is a step towards us to try and prevent the city from the future shocks that we're probably going to get. And we try and touch different range of activities so that the different user groups can indulge, come out in the open and indulge at different point in time. Last but not the least, we are trying to go towards sustainable energy solutions in our own green parks. We do not let the litter go to any site or any dump site. We are converting into vermicompost, and very happily I can say that it's sold at such cheap prices that everyday users are also buying it. There's not enough for us to use in our own park, and sometimes we end up buying it from outside. So that's for the leaf litter and compost. Similarly, we all know the groundwater table is depleting. So what we're trying to do is we've devised these alternative methodologies for irrigating our parks. So somewhere we have decentralized STP, somewhere we have constructed wetland systems. We are trying our best to make sure that this is the only way we irrigate our water. That is not true 100% right now, but the road has been laid and we are moving towards that. And what you see on the screen is compensatory plantation and afforestation. What does that mean? So all these infrastructure projects that you see in the city, Delhi Metro, PWD, roads are being laid, bullet trains are coming on. So what happens? These infrastructure projects cut down a lot of trees. So based on the forest norms here in the city, which are very strict, you cut one tree and you plant 10 trees and you pay 10,000 rupees per tree till that tree is for a period of 5 years to the forest department. So what does DDA do? DDA identifies the area. Obviously, cutting one large tree and planting a sapling does not ensure the ecology back and not in the same location, but we are at least trying to make that difference to our city on a whole, and I hope in future, some more years, we'll be able to realize what the difference is. And last, what we are trying to do is we are trying to go solar. So there's one 1 megawatt solar plant, which is already under installation in the north of Delhi, in a green area called Coronation Park, and 2 are in the pipeline. So we hope that whatever carbon footprints that we are generating, we will be able to give back to the city in some manner. That's about it. Thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you, ma'am. Since you'll be leaving, would you like to take 1 or 2 questions?
Sure, I have 5 minutes.
Yes. Is there any question? First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation about DDA's good work in ecological restoration, especially around the river Yamuna and also the Biodiversity Park. We have time for 1 or 2 quick questions. Yes.
Okay, so right, your concern is absolutely correct here. So what we try in every green areas, we have about 700 parks. So I would say cities, 60% of greens are with DDA. So what we do is we follow a silent norm here that 40% of the area would be wooded in most of the green areas. So what happens is, having said that, there is a different, so these parks are not ticketed, they're open to everybody because they're everybody's land. So different age groups come there with different, a user interface. So there are these children who need to play. So the area where it's left for kids to play, we do not grow any grass. We do not even try and maintain a grass because that does not happen. But an area where people need to sit, picnic, sit with their families, need to be grassed and need to be maintained. The cost of irrigation systems is higher, but now we are trying to adapt. So what I showed you in Vasant Udyan, we've taken an automated irrigation system. It did cost us because we were redeveloping the entire green, so it was simpler to do it. In existing green, it gets difficult. So what we are going in that way, but we are trying to minimize our lawn area.
So I think I have one more question,
Sure,
and
please.
final question, and we can close it. What do you do for the O&M? How do you manage it?
So currently, DDA has its own O&M procedures. We are.
Where do you get the funds for?
We have our own funding techniques because we have these projects. So DDA not only does parks, we are building housing, we are building commercial centers, district centers. And for some of the projects, for the river project, we've got UDF funding. So UDF is funding us for the river project because it's really going in huge numbers. But other than that, DDA is self-sustaining itself.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am, for keeping up with the time and also for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much, and my apologies, I need to leave.
Sure, sure. So we have with us the next speaker, Dr. Sasha Bruja, and please make sure that you have a short presentation so we can have some time for questions.
So I'm trying to find the presentation.
Do you want me to help you?
Probably I'll find it. Do you know where it is?
Your chat, your
They said it would be there. You have it? Okay.
It's here. It's here because there are several pen drives. So this is Shundi, and this is Aegis, right?
Yeah.
Up. I just put it to view.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here in India, a great country, and a very, very important topic to discuss today about. If you think about climate change, in particular in the context of a growing urbanization, that drives low carbon and resilient cities, or sustainable cities, I must say so, which has an impact on all sectors and industries across the world. So we from Aegis, we're looking at, let's say, buildings, sustainable cities aspects, we're looking at transport, we're looking at water and energy, and all of these industries will have to be dealt with. Now, since goods and people are moved mostly on the road, I'd like today take the perspective from the road transport sector. And we have, of course, a number of solutions to tackle these aspects of climate change and air pollution and so on. We are a company that develops, integrates, and operates large systems to collect and enforce usage of roads and also externalities like air pollution, etc. And the aim, of course, is for us to reduce carbon emissions, decrease traffic congestion, and also air pollution. So there are a number of policy tools that we can apply. For example, from managing on-street parking or tolling or congestion charging and other tools. But what I like to look at with you today is the low emission zone and clean air zone topic, because that's something that's coming up in many cities of this world. So just take one step back. What's the problem? So where do we start? Have a look at the transportation problems, then at some policies, give you an outlook on what low emission zones and clean air zones exist today, and then give also some lessons learned from one of those schemes that we have been implementing in Manchester. Now, just transportation issues is not a problem in India only. There's a global problem, transportation issues. On one hand side, what we constantly see is the lack of funding into infrastructure investments, particularly in green infrastructure, because constant deficits of state budget cause a problem. We have, in most of the metropolitan cities around the world, a problem of congestion. And the road transport sector is a major contributor of CO2 emission, which directly impacts climate change. It does not only climate change impact, let's say, heating up or floods and impact on water and etc. nutrition. It also contributes to pollution of air. So in the world, 99% of the population in urban areas are exposed to those air pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide, particulate matters, and other pollutants as well. Now, there are a number of policies that you can apply. You can try to regulate the traffic by giving, let's say, information to the users. That requires, as some other speakers said, to collect the data, of course. Not everywhere applicable. You can play with the policy tool of parking management, meaning you can increase prices in order to prevent that people go into congested areas. But hey, that's not the goal of parking. Parking has a price for parking and not for decongestion, generally speaking. And you can, of course, access control and charge. So in access control, we have worldwide a number of cases where we try to reserve dedicated lanes where specific cars with many people in the car can drive. You can also terminate, for example, if you have an odd and even license plate, so that allows you to go or not to go on specific dates. And you can design low emission zones. I'll come to this in a sec. On the other hand, you can also apply a charge. So you can take the price mechanism instead of just regulating quantity in and out. And the price mechanism known as road user charging has three main objectives. It's either meant to collect money to invest into infrastructure, as we said before, the constant lack of those funds, or to decongest, or to lower the emissions. All of these policies have pros and cons. Benefits are evident. Typically, they reduce traffic, and they also have a positive impact on the emission. However, the objectives are very distinct from each other. So if we dive into low emission zones, you can see there are a number of low emission zones that exist today. For example, here in Europe, 245 cities or even more today have already introduced a low emission zone. That means there is a designated area within typically the CBD area or the city center where you're only allowed to access if you meet certain criteria. A clean car can access, a pollutant car may not be allowed to access at all. So it's a restriction. That works quite well, but the implication on the long run are different than the charging. On the other hand, what we have is not only low emission zones, as I just showed you before, there are a couple of flagship projects that are combined with congestion charge, low emission zone, and or clean air zones. Take, for example, Milan. They started with, let's say, a green area where you were only allowed to go in with pollutant cars, but those cars became cleaner, so the congestion came back, and they had to introduce a congestion charge on top of it. So you have double layers today. The same applies for London, just in the opposite sequence, and other cities. Well, what happened lately is a shift from congestion to clean air, because we see that the cost of society for health is so tremendously growing that we have to do something. Most of the cities are exceeding the threshold values of the WHO. It means people are inhaling, as I said earlier, very bad air, and that kills many people. So rising stars in that field is Birmingham, Bath, Portsmouth, and Manchester. Manchester has been the latest and the biggest clean air zone scheme that Aegis is basically implementing. So just to wrap it up, in that respect with examples, you can see that there are many other cities as well that have used either one of those policies that I mentioned in different forms, with different technologies, by the way, and depending on the objective itself. So it works, but you can see there are not so many. It means somehow it's difficult to push these schemes through. There's a big debate, of course, on political and on the public level. Why should I not go into somewhere? Why should I pay? However, the Manchester Clean Air Zone, I think, is a flagship project because it's now established and run by a private sector company, us in this case. So we started in 2002 after being awarded to set up the zone within the Manchester city, and we are operating it, or we will soon operate it as an end-to-end service. It means, as I said earlier, specific cars or different type of classes are allowed to go in, others are not. Or respectively, they have to pay, let's put it like this. We use camera systems, so modern technology, which also uses artificial intelligence to detect and identify license plates, so to be able to see, is he allowed to pay, does he have to pay, is he allowed to come, and so on and so forth. And the scheme is meant to cater for more than 1.5 million journeys. That's the plan. Now, why do we do that? Of course, as I said earlier, there's a strong implication that people inhale very bad air. And as you can see in Manchester itself, in the wider area, almost 1,200 deaths annually. That's what we have. And it also has implication on the hospital, let's say, occupancy rates, and drives the social cost high. And prediction says that in England, by 2035, if nothing would change, the cost would be more than £5 billion. That's what we as a society would have to pay in England. Now, with the scheme itself, of course, to make people charge if they pollute, we try to bring then the levels down within the legal limits as suggested by WHO. Now, this may look complicated. It is complicated, but we managed in a very short time to set up a scheme which we, together with our partners, put in place. So where we, on one hand side, have installed the roadside system with the technology and the artificial intelligence technology to detect and identify users on the one hand side. On the other hand, we have a central system set up which manages the customer interface, the payment means, exceptions handling, and financial reconciliations. And we have an organization set up as well to make sure that all those fraudulent, let's say, drivers that are supposed to pay but haven't paid are caught and controlled, and also we make them pay. So in UK, it's called the penalty charge notice, a specific process that's quite well established. So the project was in delay, but the target to go live was not shifted. So we had to do it in a very, very short months, in a couple of months, and we successfully launched this program. Unfortunately, and that's my last slide on Manchester, it's not always as easy as it may look like. But the government faced a strong vocal opposition. People rejected the scheme because they did not understand fully what it meant. They understood in the beginning, okay, it's about clean air, but everybody has to pay or nobody is allowed to go in. So it wasn't at all clear which vehicle type was subject for a charge. They also didn't understand that some of them were exempted. So maybe, for example, if you have an equity issue, low income, you may be able to give exemptions to those that cannot afford but still need to drive to the city center. They were not aware that there was a funding scheme behind, so making this place go live means also that funds from the governments are effectively used to, for example, build infrastructure like metros or public transit and so on and so forth. and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the debate led to the fact that it wasn't discussing the environmental impact, but just the politics between Mr. Boris Johnson and the mayor at the end of the day. However, it's coming. I'm very hopeful, and I think we'll see a very successful scheme very soon. And when I say successful, why do we do that? Of course, there are some numbers behind, which gives us evidence. If you look at this, it's just a reflection. I just quoted 4 cities, London, Stockholm, Milan. The moment that they introduced a scheme, in this case on the upper part was more congestion charging related or low emission zone related, traffic volume decreased immediately significantly. Now, when they introduced the charging scheme, we saw that also the pollutants like CO2, PM10, even PM.2.5, and NOx drastically declined. So as a, let's say in a nutshell, these schemes really do decrease air pollution and contribute to a better, let's say, health. Now, for India, we looked at it. India has principally the similar problems that I described, which is on the global level applying to everybody. We have the road transport sector with 75% contributing with the emissions, so CO2. This contributes to climate change. 2 of the cities, like Mumbai and Bengaluru, are among the top 10 congested cities in the world. This creates a huge burden on the social cost, as I explained earlier. And also more than 90% of India's population are exposed to PM2.5. These are the small particles that goes into your lung and cause cancer. So it's the second biggest health risk for death in this country as well. So it has to be taken serious. And yeah, that's it for now, for my side.
Thank you. You're pretty much well on time, so we have time for a couple of questions. Yeah, 2. Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Gokul. I'm a senior DCM with Kochi Metro Rail Limited. You said you're using ANPR cameras for capturing the vehicle images. So are you looking at the age of the vehicle, or are you looking at some kind of a certification of the pollution standards that's already been tested and certified? And then are you looking for the database where you're looking at these 2 readings, and does your system do that, or just are you?
Yes.
Are you looking at PM 2.5 limits as being certified by some certifier, or is it just the age of the vehicle that
Yes.
you're looking at?
We look at 2 things: the type and the class of the vehicle. So the type could be either a lorry or a bus or a light vehicle, for example. And the class is the Euro emission class. So by identifying the vehicle, we know which class it has, whether it's a pollutant or not a pollutant. So they're the Euro norms in Europe that exist from 0 to 5, 6 nowadays. And the higher you go, like Euro 6 class, means you have a less pollutant car. So we identify each vehicle by its type and class. And then depending on the scheme, let's say parameters, you either charge the car or you let it go because it falls within the band.
So it's basically the model of the car. It's basically if it complies with stage 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
Not the actual reading.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
a Euro 5 car can be more polluting than a Euro 3 car, but still can be on the road.
Well, if you have a
exceptions,
Euro
of
norm,
course.
normally not, I would say. If you have a Euro norm, then the Euro class 5
So you're looking
is
at the
cleaner
norms
than
rather
the 3.
than the actual readings of the
No, we look at, we don't measure the PM from the exhaust pipe because that's very difficult. Even that artificial intelligence can do today, but it's not very accurate.
Yeah, but it could have certified by some other testing agency. I mean, all vehicles get tested for their pollution here.
That's correct. That's why Euronorm for us in Europe, at least, if we take the European perspective, is very standardized. So if your car goes off with a class, then you can, let's say, count on it that the Euro 5 emission really does not emit more than X NO2 or PM 2.5. So that's for us. So we identify the vehicle and then we check the classification and then we check whether it falls within the limits or not. Good question. Of course, I won't give you all the details commercially, but I can say it was a public procurement, so every bidder was allowed to attend if he qualified. We were among the top 2, let's say, in the last round, and we won it. Of course, on the basis of our offering, and what we quoted was on one hand side the implementation of the technology itself and the operation. You know, many people have a focus on the operation, on the technology very often, and you know, we discuss ALPR, like what you asked, artificial intelligence, but as a matter of fact, what's sometimes even over long times and much more important is the operational cost, and that's where Aegis brought all the value add into it, because we know how to ramp up systems more efficiently than the government. They trusted us, so they gave us the contract like a BOT type of project, but it wasn't a PPP. In that respect, it's about, you know, meeting certain performance KPIs at the end of the day.
Just one question.
Please.
My name is Ashish from the
Yes, hello.
So, like, the city might be a big city right now, we're talking about Manchester. So, there will be multiple entry exit points to the city. So, it will be how difficult or easy it is to control the traffic going into the city from different routes, first of all. And is that a bigger area? Because if you are stopping the people or checking the entry at like the city main CBD area, then it will lead to congestion in that zone.
Yes.
So it should be done maybe probably outside the city. How you are doing that? This
Yeah.
question.
Two things. First of all, the number of points that you control where traffic can flow depends on the road topology. So for example, Stockholm has 46 points and we have hundreds of points because it's much more dense network. I did not say about the scheme itself that it's of course a free flow, because if we would have barriers or checks, we would cause another congestion layer. We don't. So therefore we use ALPR cameras, a fully automated scheme that detects, identifies and communicates the data of that particular vehicle, and does all the rest, as I said before, the payment transaction, all the enforcement transactions. So all the functions are fully automated by our systems, but we do have people still on the ground that for reasons of legal nature or regulatory framework need to do spot checks, but not by stopping at a specific point.
Thank you.
I think, Dr. Sasha, this is a very interesting topic, and it's also of very much relevance to India given the state of pollution. And we're just having a conversation before the start of the meet regarding how polluted Delhi can be or will be this winter season. And I think this plays a very key role. And I hope everybody gets a chance to talk to Dr. Sasha after this particular session is over, when we are having a couple of drinks. Probably he may spill some beans out and say what is the costing model and how we can go about it.
For non-alcoholic drinks. No, but my pleasure.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I also see that, the northern part of Italy and Germany, where much of the cars are being manufactured, there are more number of those clean air spots or
Yes.
dots, which
But
is
very badly controlled, and therefore the fraud rate is very high.
okay. That's interesting to know. And in India, if we are going to go towards NDC, I think that additional 20% reduction in the emissions is going to make all the much difference, as we reach the goal towards 2030. With that, I invite our next speaker, Mr. Venkat Garimala. Venkat, please, the stage is yours. And as indicated to the previous speaker, if you can keep it brief, then we can have more questions from the audience.
So let me just, sorry. All right. Yeah, so good evening, everyone, and thanks, Dr. Acheka, to give me this opportunity to speak here. My earlier panelists really spoke very well on two interesting topics, very important topics. One was about water, landscape, and the other one was about mobility and the pollution. Now I'm going to talk about energy, right? We talked about clean water, clean air. Now we'll talk about clean energy. So that's where I'm going to be spending a few minutes now. See, what is happening is today, if you look at the total cities that we have, I think 3% of this surface of this planet is occupied by cities, but unfortunately, these cities contribute to 70% of emissions. 50% of world's population is living in the urban areas. This is going to increase to 70% by 2050. We're going to urbanize 2.5 billion people in next 30 years, right? Now, back home in India, we're going to be seeing 800 million people in urban areas by 2030. A lot of these growth is going to come our way. We, 3/4 of the buildings that will exist in India by 2030 are yet to be built. Every year, we're going to add close to 700 to 900 square meters of residential and building space for next 10, 12 years. It's like adding city of Chicago to India every year for next 10 years, right? Today, if you see the urban infrastructure, the way it is going, we have already 750 kilometers of metro rail. What is interesting is another 1,000 kilometers of metro rail development is in progress in different parts of the city, in 20, 27 cities. Now, moving on to the energy landscape. If you see today, India, we are going to, the total power generation that is required by 2030, 55% of that is yet to be built. Our total generation capacity of electricity today is close to 400 gigawatts. This is going to get to 820, 830 gigawatt by 2030. In next 8 years, we're going to add so much of power generation capacity. I talked about clean power. Today, if you see the power generation capacity from non-fossil fuels is about 160 gigawatt. That is likely to jump close to 400 gigawatt in just 8-9 years, right? Now, why I'm talking about this is when we talk about all the development, when we talk about all the urbanization, energy indeed plays a very, very significant role. Today we have more than 64 countries who have committed net zero. We have close to 3,600 corporations worldwide who are committed to net zero. Now, if all these things is to really come in play, and perhaps if you all have to make efforts in bringing the global warming back to the trajectory of 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century, which is unfortunately not on the right trajectory at this point in time, I think cities have to be net zero, or perhaps should have significantly lower emissions. No great wisdom, we all know about it. The point is, how do we get there? That is what I'm trying to propose here. The way, I hope it is visible because of the white font. I'm sorry about that. The way it looks like is, let's say 2019, right? Energy-specific emissions were close to about 30 gigatons, 2019, right? When I say energy-specific emissions, I'm talking about emissions on account of electricity generation, emissions on account of using energy in building, factories, homes, and also for transportation. So we are talking about a 30 gigaton kind of emissions in 2019. Now, the way we look at it, this is as per our Schneider Sustainability Research Institute document, which is there for anyone to go and read. It's called Back to 2050. The way we kind of model this is we have to do two things. By 2030, we need to bring down the emissions to half. 30 gigaton has to come down to 15, 10 to 15. By the way, with all the commitments around the world today, the abatement is just around 3 to 4 gigatons per annum only, which is grossly insufficient. So what we propose is, let's get down to 10 to 15 gigawatt by 2030. And how do we do that? Three things, three simple things. First is embrace energy efficiency. There is huge amount of scope on energy efficiency. I'm sure my subsequent panelist, Isabel, also is going to talk about energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is never going to go out of fashion. As a matter of fact, close to about 25% of decarbonization targets that we have are going to be met by energy efficiency. Look at this. Today, we burn, let's say, 3 units of coal in a thermal power plant. We get 1 unit of electricity at our home. And it works other way very well. You save 1 unit at your home, you kind of save 3 units of primary source of energy to be burned, right? So this is the kind of power of energy efficiency. Talk about buildings, right? A lot of buildings are going to come our way. In India, best-in-class energy efficiency buildings are 70% more efficient than the normal buildings. Best-in-class hotels, hospitals are 50% more energy efficient than the normal hotels and hospitals. Manufacturing, if we talk about, best-in-class steel plant is 30% more energy efficient, right? So energy efficient is indeed one of the important pillars for decarbonization, and it applies for cities. You know, one very interesting example I would like to quote here for India was about the Ujala scheme. It was a phenomenal scheme, right? 36 crores of LED lamps, right? Which ESL kind of ran this program, and this has contributed saving of 40 million tons of CO2 per annum. And energy efficiency pays for itself, right? The ROI can be, 2 to 3 years, and then it's like fixed deposit. It kind of saves your money as well. Ujala scheme kind of saved close to 19,500 crores of energy bills. So that's the power of energy efficiency, a very important pillar for decarbonization. The second one is electrification. Electricity was invented way back in 1750. You know that story, right? Benjamin Franklin on a rainy day, a kite with a keychain and things like that. 100 years later, we had Thomas Alva Edison, who kind of made the electric bulb, right? So 150 years back is what electricity was invented, but unfortunately today, electricity is only 18% of energy mix, only 18% of energy mix. Second industrial revolution, electricity bulb was invented. At the same time, fossil fuels, the first known, the oil was drilled, known commercially, oil drill happened. But somehow electricity kind of left behind, and the other fuels and other forms of energy kind of took over. 150 years, 18% is electricity. So I think it's time for us to accelerate electrification. We see that already happening. EV, right? Electrical vehicles is one of the biggest examples in the world where things are getting electrified in a big way. Why? Because electricity is the only vector of energy which can be decarbonized on the demand side, which can also be greenified on the supply side. There isn't any other energy which has this very typical characteristics, unlike electricity. So that's what is electrification, and there's a lot of it. I know some areas are very difficult to electrify. You can't have a battery or a hydrogen cell operated aeroplane. You can't have a shipping line working on something else on solar. So I think we'll get there. But the point is, whatever we can electrify, I think we should, and there's a huge opportunity to electrify, especially in industries. Process heating in most of the industries is not electrified today. We make steel by using blast furnace. You know how blast furnace operates. You have coke and you have coal, everything going inside. So a lot of electrification is going to come our way, and as per our analysis, electrification is going to contribute to 30% decarbonization, right? So on the demand side, we have 55% of decarbonization coming our way. And of course, on the supply side, this is the most normally talked topic about renewables, right? Solar and wind. Indeed, that is also going to help us in decarbonization. So these are 3 steps, the way we see in our decarbonization journey. Now, if you talk about, and by the way, just to conclude my point, the way we see as per this modeling theory that we have made, by I think 2050, we'll see electricity going to be 60% of energy mix compared to 18% in 2018. Perhaps renewables need to be 90% of electricity supply versus 25% of 2018. This is what a kind of a larger picture that we see by 2050, and when we do this, we see decarbonization happening in a significant way. We see by 2050, perhaps we can get to net zero. I did not talk about digital here. Now, this digitalization is kind of going to transform the entire energy sector. Look at electricity. Electricity is invisible, right? And what is energy efficiency? I kind of talked a lot about energy efficiency. Now, what is energy efficiency? Energy efficiency is the absence of invisible, right? So it gets a little complicated, and that's where kind of digitization really helps. So digitization-enabled energy efficiency, digitization-enabled greenification of electricity is indeed going to be the game changer. 1 minute on cities now that we are talking about. When we look at cities, the way we have an example of Naya Raipur, which is the Atal Nagar, which we did integrated green city, smart city that we did. There are various components. First is smart energy, all that we talked about, right? Then we talk about smart water. This is also super critical. And the third thing is smart build. whether it is school buildings, office building, residential building, infrastructure building like airport, metros. So this is the smart building aspects. And the last but not the least is the smart integration. In any smart city or in a city, there are multiple departments, right? How do we integrate them all so that they are all seamlessly working, helping the administration to have a full view, a cockpit view of what's happening? And this is where is the complexity comes in. And that's where we need interoperable, open architecture systems, and that is what I call as smart integration. I've not talked about smart mobility, but it is also embedded. When you have this kind of a planning of a systemic efficiency approach, right from designing and build, perhaps you will see a super efficient city, reduction in emissions by 30%, reduction in the water usage by 50%. This is my last slide, Naya Raipur smart city that we kind of built exactly on the same principles. It was commissioned in 2019. I think I will stop here, and we'll be very happy to, if you have any questions, to answer them.
Sure.
That's all I had,
Thank
Doctor.
You. Thank you very much for the presentation and also making sure that you stick to the time. We have time for one question to Mr. Venkat, and probably we have 30 minutes for another 4 presentations. So we are running a bit late, but nevertheless, we will be happy to take one question if there is any. Okay, probably at the next
Yeah.
stage.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, do we have our next speaker, Ms. Jamila? Is she online? Jamila, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself, and we are not able to hear you, so is she's
Hi, hello, good afternoon. Do you
okay.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yes.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you so much.
You have 10 minutes, Jamila. So if you could finish it early, then we can take a few questions. Otherwise, we'll come back in the end for the questions. So the floor is yours. Please make it full screen so that people can see your presentation clearly. Thank you. Ms. Jamila, your screen is frozen, so could you please check your video and your audio or reconnect? I think it's not the problem here, right? I think we have Berinja online, and Berinja, can you hear us so that we can?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So,
Good afternoon to everyone. I can hear you very well.
okay, so we'll wait for Jamila to join us. I was just wondering whether the problem was at our end or at Jamila's end. So we'll wait for her to
No
connect back
problem.
again. Thank you, Berinja. But we'll move on to our next speaker, and we'll come back to Jamila. So with that, I invite Ms. Isabel. Isabel, please.
Where is it? Is here? Is that here? Yeah? Yeah. Here we are. So, hi, I'm Isabelle Degnaud. I'm the Development and Partnerships Director for Efficacity. So Efficacity is a research and development institute dedicated to the low carbon city. It's been funded 8 years ago by the French government, and it brings together the best expertise of both public and private sectors. So for the private sector, we work with energy companies such as Engie. Actually, Tab Reid is here, a partner who we work with about integrating cooling system. But we work with Schneider as well, and company as Aegis. So that's fun to find actually my partners here, so far away from home. It feels home. So as you can see, we work with those private partners, industrial mainly, and for the public research, we work with the best academic stakeholders of the sustainable city. So we work closely, obviously, with cities and territories all over France, with urban planners, all the stakeholders of the cities to reduce their carbon print. So what we do... What?
Ouais. Alors vous avez interchangé, c'est ça?
Okay, so I'm not by myself here. We're two. That's me and myself. What we do is that we develop tools and methodology for cities. The first area we work in is innovation. So we have been commissioned like 5 years ago by the Banque des Territoires, which is a public body, French public body, basically the bank for the cities in France, to craft actually monitoring and evaluation methodology for billions of euros programs in France. We covered 1,000 projects, and this is the reason why AFD, which is here, Camille, thank you, has asked us actually to work with the National Institute of Urban Affairs in here on monitoring and evaluate the cities program. So that has been the first time we started working with actually, foreign country, and since we have started working with Morocco, China, Cameroon, and soon Japan. We claim first that we've been working with you guys, so thank you for that. In the cities program, we conducted like 100 hours of trainings, frameworks, 100 workshops, 250 indicators that we adapted to Indian cities specifically. And we are very, very happy to go on working with NIUA on the update on Cities 2, coming soon. So the second area we work on is, I would call that the neighborhood or district scale. We developed a comprehensive software suite for low carbon districts. So that actually includes urban energy for the city to manage its own urban energy and plan it. The software suite, as you can see, is composed of 4 different softwares. I won't get into details, but basically it covers the design phases of, pre-feasibility up to feasibility studies through energy performance, energy management of the project. And I will actually ask you to look at the Energy Mapper software specifically, which is a software that we decided both with the NIUA and AFD to adapt here in India. So, of course, it comes with, collecting data. Of course, it comes with, a lot of work, but the program Cities 2 should enable us to do that work. So Energy Mapper is dedicated to identify energy sources on your territory, on your cities as urban planner, and it includes the renewable energy, recovery energy. And to show you a study case, this is an example of the city Rouen Métropole in France, which is in Normandy, north of France. So as you can see on the map, the Energy Mapper identifies and screens all the energy sources such as data center, recovery heat, biomass, and so on, which actually give you at the end, it calculates for you very quickly, like a matter of seconds, the optimal scenarios in terms of energy mix with all, the possible sizing for it, sorting in the operating constraints, and the technical and economic criteria. So that is a work that will start now with the NIUA, and we've been meeting as well the Bureau of Energy Efficiency here to, to cover the data, and yeah, we have in mind all those issues. The last area that we address is an upper scale of the territory. So that would be the cities and the territories. Whereas with the software that I've shown you, we work up to 1,000 building scale. This is the first climate action plan comes with a very French and very specific experience. As a matter of fact, in France, the French government has made compulsory for cities to plan their land use and their climate action ahead of time, and every 10 years at the least, updated. And it's been 15 years that the French government made it mandatory. So that developed, we developed an expertise on the subject of climate action plan. So that will be actually another area we will work on with NIUA, with the cities that will join Cities 2 programs. Developing the methodology that we are actually developing already at the same time in France. And last but not least, as has been already said, Cities 2 will embark as well an award, a certification called Smart and Sustainable City Award. So this is an award that we are benchmarking at the European Union, the only one, a part of Lead for Cities, which is American and not as much complete. It actually covers the 17 sustainable development goals. As you know, in India, there are 7 or 8 certifications, existing certifications, and the idea with the Cities 2 program is to cover for the new thematic fields, which are a few actually, and to cover all the SDGs. So that is the last area we will work on in India. And actually, looking at all I've been going through, that gives you an idea of what we're doing. So we're very happy again and so glad that we are working on all our areas and expertise here in India. And I will stop here to make sure you can ask me some questions.
Actually, we are running short of time, so could we take the questions in the end?
Of course.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'm sure I was 8 minutes though.
I do
I'm being
agree,
punished for
but
it.
we have been running late.
Sure.
So, Ms. Jamila, can you hear us?
Do you hear me? Hello?
Can we have the volume?
Sorry. I don't know if you see my presentation.
Yes, we can see your presentation and we can hear you clearly. Please.
Great, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Jamila Kulu, and I am a project manager for sustainable cities. I work for the French government, for the Ministry for the Ecological Transition, and for the Coercion of Territory. Excuse me. So first of all, I would like to tell that urban areas play an increasingly critical role in the climate adaptation. And we know that by 2030, 5 billion people will live in cities. That means that the global population growth towards 2030 will be almost entirely absorbed by cities. That's a big challenge for sustainable cities. I will talk about the French policy on sustainable cities and the French vision of the sustainable cities before talking about the tools for sustainable cities in France. What is our view on this subject? For us, the French vision is a global, holistic, and integrated approach. We talk about resilient cities resilience to climate change, to risks, to pandemic, the one that we know everywhere. And we talk about cities with a careful use of resources, low carbon, and cities based on circular economy. Green cities. The objective is to have high quality of life in cities and to have inclusive and co-developed cities without ghettos, cities where the citizen participation is a big objective. And we have also, we need to tell that we need agility, cities who have adaptability to the geographical situation, to the social condition, to the practical situations. When we talk in France about smart cities, for the French ministry, the technology is it's a tool, it's not a name. The objective is to have innovative technologies contributing to the citizens. And when we talk about sustainable cities, we talk about sustainable cities around all the territory. One tool for French sustainable cities is what we call eco-district. Eco-district, or eco-quartier in France, is a program set for helping to draw new methods to create, build and manage cities, districts, and link urban and rural territories. It's not only a program for urban territories, it's also a program for rural territories. In this kind of program, we have a diversity of projects, and the objective, the challenge, is to have an integration in the specific context of the territory. And eco-district is not a budget, or it's not financing projects. It's a label with 4 levels of labelization, and also with a charter of 20 commandments grouped in 4 dimensions: approach and process, living environment and uses, territorial development, environment and climate. Today we have around 600 eco-districts all around the territory, and we have also international cooperations with, for example, Japan, with Colombia, with Mexico, with Tunisia, and also in Africa. Another program is the program that we call Cœur de Ville, in English, Action Heart of Cities. It's a twofold ambition. The first is to improve the living conditions of the citizens of medium-sized towns, and to strengthen the role of these towns as a driving force in the development of the territory. It's a program especially dedicated to the medium towns, because the objective is not to work only on big areas of metropolitan territory, but also on medium sized towns, and also on small towns, but it's another program. The program Cœur de Ville is a partnership investment plan with local territory, with local governance, and it's today 5 billion over 5 years, and we have also international cooperation and interest with Romania, with Brazil, with Ivory Coast. I would like also to talk about, it's not a program, a dedicated program, but we have a program which is close to that, which is a full fish, wasteland. And it's what we call in France urbanisme transitoire, transitional urbanism. It's a new urban fabric to evolve the methods of rebuilding the metropolis for more resilient and flexible cities. First, it was inspired by artists, collectives, or citizen initiative for the reappropriation of sectors to build a city on industrial desertification. And it's also an opportunity for urban actors and citizens to work together to test new uses for obsolete building and abandoned urban spaces. And it's also a prefiguration of a new sustainable city, integrating uses, support for consultation, and new experimentation, supporting new urban challenges. In this kind of projects, we have social housing, we have economy, we have urban agriculture. So one example, if you know Paris, or maybe if you return to Paris to visit urban projects on sustainable cities, we had an operation in the center of Paris, in the 12 district, which is la caserne de Reuilly Barak. It was a rehabilitation of the former Reuilly barracks, Lloyd barracks, and the objective is to have an urban operation on this district, but to conserve the old architectural heritage, and to work with social organization, to work with all the citizens to develop affordable housing, social needs, facilities, community centers. And the ambition of this project is to be neutral carbon, to respect biodiversity, to respect planting, to develop shared gardens. And all these projects are pursuing today with one program that we call For Fish Wasteland Fund. It's a major challenge for sustainable land use planning to meet the objectives of controlling urban sprawl, urban revitalization, revitalization and limiting the consumption of natural, agricultural, and forest areas. And it's a major land resource for the mobilization and development of the zero net artificialization, which is a new program developed in France in the climate and resilience law. And this program, which is divided in two programs, will explore social housing, will explore a lot of different topics for sustainable cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking us to some of the initiatives which are being undertaken by the French government. Just because we are running a bit short of time, what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead with give the space for the next two speakers, and I request all of you to please bear with us so that we can take a few questions at the end for all of them collectively. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Sunil Kumar to deliver his talk.
Thanks. Yeah, hi. Thanks, Doctor, for the introduction. And then, so here, myself, Sunil. So I'm representing Dassault Systems. So today, I'll be taking you quickly through one of the project which we have done in India with this city of Jaipur. And primarily in line with the topic of today's session is about decarbonization and resilient cities. So primarily, we have a belief, or everybody will agree to that, it's all about, let's say, the data, what we can acquire, the data which we have. And if we have the data from all the major, you can say, stakeholders in a city, then we can do a lot of what-if simulations. We can plan our strategies. We can plan all the exigency scenarios. So ultimately, which results in, let us say, doing the perfect right first time on the ground, rather than we are playing, let's say, rather than we do a lot of, let's say, prototype, or we do mistakes on the ground, and then which ultimately results in a lot of waste in terms of, you can say, time, material, cost, and each and everything upon to that. So on that is the basically the basis of doing a virtual city, what we say. So primarily here is what we have done is created a virtual city. So with the help of, let's say, the Rajasthan government, where we worked on this project, I'm not sure it's a full screen, okay. So where we basically, with the help of, let's say, doing all my, you can say, GIS mapping and things, where we took the complete city area onto that, we converted the complete to a virtual environment. The main basic theme of doing the virtual environment, as I said, is about first, that planner and the strategist, they would be able to see or visualize what exactly they want to do upon to that. So for example, let us say when we, let's say, do this part of a city where I'm able to do this part of a building. Okay, now I want to strategize, let's say, how much of solar energy potential is there. So since I'm having the accurate information upon to that, I can very well simulate, yes, this is the area available on the rooftops of these buildings on this particular area. With some thumb rule calculation, I can come up with, yes, this is my solar potential upon to that. So that is where, let us say, doing these types of, you can say, the various use cases which we are running with various city governments. So primarily, let's say, when we talk about, let's say, with respect to, let's say, smart buildings upon to that. But to make a building smart, I need to, let us say, simulate, let's say, how my energy consumption or how my, let's say, HVAC is going to work within my city, within my building upon to that. So with, let's say, whatever the let's say, technology which we are doing for years with respect to all my aircraft and you can say cars and automotive things, we use the same technology to simulate, yes, this is where how the HVAC is going to work, which is, this is the best way of, let's say, putting up the windows or putting up the conduits and things there, and then do those activities. So like that, so the main objective of doing these types of, let's say, virtualization is doing, even for that, we are doing one particular project for exigencies. Let's say we live in India, we know that, okay, the type of roads we have on the main areas and the congested environment. So I want to plan, let us say, yes, if there is some exigency on this part A of a city, then which type of, let's say, my fire tender will go? Do I need a bigger fire tender, or there is no space for a bigger fire tender to go there? So then I will be playing with all those simulation. Yes, for this particular thing, I need to plan for these many fire tenders, which are of smaller in size, but more in quantity, to take care of that. Putting up, let's say, any type of, let's say, new bridges or a metros upon to that. So all the conceptual planning, I can very well quickly do onto this virtual environment. So that when I'm negotiating or putting up a tender in detail with the, let's say, my EPC companies, then I'm having more control over, yes, this is where I require and everybody is on the same page. So like that, so that is where is the core for that, is creating a virtual city, use that information, populate all the information from various stakeholders. Let's say I put up this information about my, let us say, my water treatment plant with respect to my electricity consumption, or whichever, let's say, municipality. So I can then populate the data on top of it, and then let's say I want to cover or showcase in a very visual format, let's say, grid buildings in a green color. Yes, this is where it is. Let's say all my, let's say, even we are doing a project of, let's say, doing a house tax collection based upon the information there. We do a regular, you can say, GIS mapping of that and do that, then able to calculate, yes, how much of revenue. What type of building, what type of, let's say, I want to do rainwater harvesting, what is the potential of doing on this particular building. So doing all those types of scenario is basically where the technology helps us to collate all those information, create a virtual environment, and plan all those, you can say, use cases there upon to that. So that was quick upon to that, and I hope the visual effects makes more sense than some slides upon to that, which I prefer. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for keeping up to the time, and quite an interesting presentation on Jaipur, and taking us through a whirlwind tour of the city over there. I invite our last presenter, Ms. Beringer Mercier. Can you hear us? I think if you're on mute.
I can hear you. I
Okay.
hope that you are able to hear me as well.
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Please.
Okay, and can you see my screen as
Yes,
well?
yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone, or good afternoon, I would say. It's a great pleasure to participate to this Indo-French seminar today, and for giving me the opportunity to present the work the CMA is implementing on resilience. So I'm very sorry for not being able to join you today. So I will go through this short presentation. So as we all see over the last few months and years, so the recent heat waves, the floods, cyclone, health pandemics, remind that shock and crises are indeed unpredictable and are becoming more frequent and more intense. So national governments, institutions, local authorities, and communities are on the front line of such crises. So unfortunately, as we all could see, that the endless possibilities of crises are not only related to climate change impact, which is in itself a big challenge, but also to natural resources depletion. Climate change is, I would say, only one of the 9 critical planetary boundaries. So the diagram on left shows that we must actually ensure that no one falls short on basic services, being food, housing, water, energy, education, while ensuring that collectively we do not overshoot our pressure on life system. and it's critical to maintain urban, economic, and social development between this social foundation and this ecological ceiling. And while authorities and communities will unfortunately continue to face crises, it's important to strengthen their resilient capacities. And this should be seen as actually an opportunity to implement systemic or more overall changes. So that's why when we are talking about resilience, it means reaching for capacities, as the diagram in the middle can show. So the capacity to anticipate any type of shocks, crises, disruption, the capacity to resist as much as we can and absorb the crisis and limit the damages, the capacity to recover from these crises, and I would say one of the most important, the ability to adapt and transform in order to define a new path for development. So based on the experiences that we've had over the last few years with local authorities here in France and abroad as well, we actually realized that the main obstacles and barriers to implement resilience are not necessarily related to technical or engineering issues. And the innovation and example that we saw today illustrate this. So, but the barriers and the obstacles are rather related to governance and institutional issues, to the lack of financial capacities at local level or lack of technical capacities, wherever decentralization is not yet achieved. The need to ensure a just transition, as the most vulnerable groups should actually not carry out the burden of these changes. It's really important to ensure that actually in order to enforce these resilient capacities, it is important to ensure that all policies, strategy, action do not prevent the most vulnerable from accessing these basic and essential services. So as part of the CEREMA, so the CEREMA, which is a French public agency focusing on urban development, climate, risk, and mobility, so we actually work at both national level with ministries and national institutions, but also at local level with local authorities. So this actually helps us to understand how these national policies and strategy should be translated at local level, and what are the issues local authorities, local self-government are facing, either in terms of technical and financial capacities. So we actually drew lessons based on this wide experience at both national and local level, as cities have a leading role to strengthen resilience capacity. So based on this experience, we design a decision-making tool, which is the resilience compass that you can see on the screen. So these tools defines a framework for assessment, which is based on 6 key principles divided into 18 drivers for action, which are related to governance, awareness, warning system, provision of basic services, local knowledge, monitoring. And this framework can be used to understand and analyze where the local authority stands in terms of its resilient capacities. It can be used as a benchmark with example of solution coming from the best practice, or it can be also used to identify a path for action to be implemented at regional or local level, with the ultimate objective to reach the expected qualities towards resilience. So it's not a list or a catalog of action to be implemented, but rather, I would say, a guide to help local authorities or national, regional or national institutions to engage multi-stakeholder cooperation. Because based on this help decision-making tool, we are actually conducting technical assistance for authorities to define roadmap for resilience. So we did it for municipal, metropolitan, or regional authorities. For instance, in the south of France, near Marseille, or near Lyon, near Dijon, or also in cities along the coastal area or in mountain area, as these sides of area are actually facing huge challenges. And for all this technical assistance, the roadmap for resilience is actually the result of a broad consultation and participation with various stakeholders and communities. Because strengthening resilience implies to build a collective process and mobilize various stakeholders. I would say that this is actually one of the main learning that we have, that being resilient means being part of a collective process. And as part of it, the key stages that we are conducting include raising awareness to make sure that all stakeholders understand the ongoing change and their impacts both at global, national and local level. We are also conducting training and building capacities, organization of workshops with multiple stakeholders, peer-to-peer learning and study tool to share experiences and learn from others, vulnerability assessment and definition of vision, strategy and local action plan. We are also able to publish and to share this region of experience, of course. And this approach is, we are going to follow this approach in Kerala, where we will support the state of Kerala to better integrate flood risk issues into local planning documents. So this technical assistance is funded by the French Development Agency and will include the definition of guidelines based on the review of pilot master plan. Just to conclude with, so I just would like to say that during this session we had the opportunity to listen to very inspiring presentation focusing on landscape, water, mobility, energy, low carbon, digital software solution, and it's indeed very important to focus on all these key issues. But beside this, this specialized expertise, I would say it's even more critical to be able to see and understand how these different topics are linked together and interface together, because one will have impact on the other. Finally, the way we design green and public spaces will preserve biodiversity, facilitate soft mobility, help to reduce water consumption, to improve health or gender equality and so on. And I would say that this is how we should define and build resilient cities, by having these comprehensive pictures and ensuring that finally all these initiatives are part of only one piece. So, thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur. I think you did my job of nicely summarizing all the presentation and the need for integration, and that's where the resilience and sustainability does play a very key role. So we have exceeded our session, but definitely we should take a few questions for the panelists, and people who are online can turn on their cameras, and the floor is open. We'll take at least one question per panelist. If anybody has any key pressing questions, do ask. Otherwise, I'm sure that you'll have a long opportunity to have a long chat with all the panelists during the reception dinner. Yes, please introduce yourself and.
I'm Anshu from National Institute of Urban Affairs. I work as a senior associate with NIUA. I have a question for you. First of all, thank you for taking us through a 3D tour of the Jaipur city. I hope I'm audible. It's regarding the cost and the time involved in developing that 3D, because and also the how much is the costing to get it developed. Indian cities do not have that much capacity or funds. So how do you think it's possible to scale it to other cities across the world?
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you take the mic?
Yeah. So with respect to, let's say, ease of doing it now, with our, you can say, experience, now the things are quite streamlined, because when we started this project, at that point of time, acquiring the data and using the data, getting all the clearances was a bigger challenge. But now with new policy, even acquiring the data is now much more streamlined. So there definitely the time, cost and everything gets reduced a lot. Then ultimately building up that complete structure, let's say what you have seen it in there. Basically there we define the, let's say, parameter based upon the governing authority. Let's say when we worked in Jaipur, the IT department say, okay, this much reason which has to be done with the LOD level 1, which say level of detail 1, 2, 3, 5. And there are various automation tools which are being developed, which takes the things now more quickly based upon the, let's say, infrastructure what we have in our Indian cities. So if I compare, I cannot give the absolute numbers upon to that, because those I am not ready with that. But yes, the costing which we took for the first project versus the second project, it was in the second project it was quite less upon that. With respect to time as well as the, you can say, since we have built those automation tools for doing many things in an automated manner. So that has helped us a lot in reducing the cost a lot. And of course, when the department and the government has invested upon to that, they definitely have calculated some of their internal ROI and things upon to that. That's why they invested and they are reaping benefits out of it. So based upon the case to case basis, then definitely we are there to work upon to that. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other pressing questions? Yes.
Small question. So, how do the age groups of certain population affects the resilience and sustainability, or even does that affect? Like for a fact, like we know that India has a lot of young population right now, and some of the European cities have like most of their population is above 40 years old. So does this fact, does it change anything like with resilience or the sustainability or the plan for those cities? Like, and how does that change? If yes.
Isabel, you would like to take it? Or Monsieur, both?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. I'd like to answer from the perspective of traffic and young people and low income. I think one interesting insight that we've seen was the last couple of years that young people, for example, tend to use public transport rather than cars. Ownership of cars wasn't really wanted anymore. So that was great. We were hoping that this would reduce traffic, and with traffic it would reduce not only congestion, but of course air pollution and CO2 emission. However, there are interesting studies made by Capgemini and others as well that have shown that during COVID, traffic reduced, of course, as everywhere in the world drastically, and when slowly things picked up, that people came back to use their own cars. And in some cases, they even exceeded the situation before COVID. And interestingly, now come to your question, a lot of young people decided also to move back to the car. Very surprising, I would say, at least for me. So the question would be, of course, how do we treat young people and low-income people with respect to growing urbanization? Another example I'd like to give to you is looking a little bit into the future. We talk a lot about not only EVs, which will help for the climate change, but also about automated vehicles, which could reduce the number of cars on the road. What would happen is we have a shared economy, people share a car, they order it, and an automated vehicle will come by and pick you up and bring you somewhere. So at one point in time, if young people and the large majority of people like to have this on-demand service, and there's a real good service and business case behind, a lot of people will frequently use that. So young people go to school with an automated vehicle. Young people will go for shopping with an automated vehicle. And studies by Deloitte have shown that in peak times in 20 or 15 large cities of Germany, this service would lead to a fact that 30% increase of traffic congestion could lead to the fact, because young people moving on to a high frequency of automated vehicles. Okay, maybe that's a little bit future music, because automated vehicles, I personally believe, will not be there in 5 years, maybe 10, 15, 20. I mean, everybody has a different view. But there are, interestingly, a number of effects that needs to be studied further and understood, and how do we kind of deal with these, let's say, type of group of people.
Anybody would like to take that question, or any other question? So please keep it brief.
Okay. My question is to Mr. Venkat. So while you touch base upon energy efficiency being a major contributor towards achieving sustainable goals, so you also spoke about the smart city of Raipur, Naya Raipur. So I come from a district cooling company background, so Tabreed. So you might be aware that district cooling is one of the means by which you can achieve major energy efficiency. So just I was curious whether this concept was discussed for that city in a master plan level, or like what? Maybe I was just curious to know about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. District cooling, district heating, I think these are the concepts which are now getting prioritized. They are coming to mainstream. Talking about Naya Raipur, Atal Nagar Smart City, 2017, this wasn't there on the board. So obviously, these discussions did not happen. But I know Tabreed very well. There are discussions now for some of the communities, for some of the cities, to get this into this whole design and concept of district cooling, right? So it is coming up. Naya Raipur didn't.
Thank you.
Yeah, one final question, and then we'll close the.
Yeah, hi, I'm Pankhuri. I'm working for Mr. Vincent Pala. He is a member of parliament from Shillong, Meghalaya. So I had this question that given I'm studying Northeast and given it's a hilly terrain, so how effective is the drone technology? Like if you can throw light on that, because I feel there are a lot of limitations also of this technology, and given India's presidency next year for G20, we are talking a lot about digitization of health and education. So how effective is this technology in general? If you can throw some light on this. Thank you.
Yeah, so data acquisition is a combination of various things. Drone is definitely one part of it. Apart from that, we do a lot of, let's say, mobile scanning based upon the territory and based upon the region which we want to acquire the information. And yes, it is quite, now even the accuracy levels are also increasing. We are not talking about, let's say, accuracy of 4 centimeter and a 5 centimeter upon to that. And of course, based upon the use cases, it's not like that everywhere you need to have that type of accuracy. In a hilly area, let's say, we talk about, let's say, I want to come up with a ropeway. Then I need to basically acquire the data in that accuracy. Need not to have that 5, 7, 6, 7. But when I talk about, let's say, congested city like a Jaipur or a Delhi, when I want to, let's say, talk about, let's say, those use cases of calculating, let's say, my solar power potential, my rainwater harvesting, and let's say my property tax evaluation, then I need to have that type of accuracy. So based upon the use case, we define what type of accuracy level, and of course, yes, drone is that you can say today's main tool for acquiring any type of a data set. With the drone and other facilities, we'll be able to do that. And we are doing it various, a couple of hilly cities also, there we are in the process of doing that. And it's, as I said, it's based upon the use case, we'll be able to do that, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And a big round of applause to all the panelists who are online and offline for their wonderful presentation. And thank you very much to the audience for making it more interesting with your questions and also staying till the end of the session. Thank you all. Do you want to make any announcement? So I think the meeting, the final concluding session is on the Silver Oak on the first floor, where you all attended the session post-lunch. We'll see you there, and thank you very much.